Sisters and Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep.
What company do you keep? Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of South Chicago. So get ready to keep company with us and our guests as we talk about it.
Hello everyone. Welcome to Sisters and Company Talking About It live show.
Good afternoon, everyone.
It feels so good to be back. As you all know, I was away last week, and we had guest host Nardis King, who happens to be my sorority sister and a Virginia State alum, and so I really appreciated Nardis sitting in on my behalf, and the amount of show that I could listen to. She did a good job. And what do you say, Sherelle?
Oh, absolutely. She was on fire. Clearly, she was talking about something she felt very passionate about.
Yes.
And so she was into it, and she did a great job.
Right, and that's what this show is about. You know, it's about bringing these intriguing and intricate topics to the forefront to have conversations around it the way that we know how to have conversations. And so this is going to be another awesome show. It surely won't disappoint. We're going to ask all of our Facebook friends to please log on to listenvisionlive.com so that you can see the show in its entirety. And of course, if you want to call in about this topic today, you can call us at 833-202-8255. So let's just get started, because as you can see, we have our guest up here with us already, and that tells you how awesome this conversation is going to be. So as we normally do, we're going to start out with scripture, and there are two scriptures. I'm not going to read them in its entirety, but I want to at least set the stage for what we're going to talk about here today. Exodus 14:13 says, "And Moses said to the people, 'Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today.'" And 1 John 2:1-2 says, "We have an advocate who pleads our case before the Father. He is Jesus Christ, the one who is truly righteous." I like that second one to really, really kick off what we're going to talk about here today. So, Sherelle, you want to kind of set us up in terms of the conversation that we're going to have, and then we can just begin the talk show.
So let me just re-emphasize, you do want to go into listenvisionlive.com and watch this episode. You will want to tune in.
Yes.
While each of us have a story, and all of our stories are unique,
My
there
goodness.
are some people who have stories that when you hear their story, it puts your story in perspective. It's like, okay, so let me just go sit down somewhere and suck it up, because people have gone through and are going through a lot of things. And when you can say that you're still standing,
Yes, yes.
You're not even at the end of your story. No. You're still making your journey through your story.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can stay standing while you go through your journey, I tell you, man, you can certainly be an inspiration to others. Mm-hmm. And so, without further ado, we want to introduce you to Tia Anderson. We'll have Tia introduce herself to you and tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to jump right into Tia's story.
And before you start, Tia, one of the things I want to say as parents, this is going to be a pretty involved conversation, and so you get to choose whether or not you want your children to listen to what we're going to talk about today. But at the end of the day, and at the end of the story, it's about Tia deciding to live. So, Tia, introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, everyone.
You can speak up.
My name is Tia. I'm currently 39 years old, be 40 in August. Really excited about that.
Yes. Weren't we all?
I'm I'm a mother of 2 boys. My oldest is 23. My youngest is 3. Jesus sent him to me. No one could have told me I was going to have another baby, but he's here, and he's definitely a blessing, and he has given me that fresh start that I thought I would never get again. So I'm truly grateful for him. Truly, truly grateful for him. I currently work for the United States Postal Service.
Yes.
I had invested about 15 years into the medical field, and I thought that was my career. However, I lost my job, couldn't find another job, so I had to start from the bottom. I took cashier jobs, making like $10 an hour when I'm used to making twice that. But you got to start somewhere. And one day, my junior high school principal came into Sam's Club and was like, "Why you not working with me at the school?" I was like, "I didn't even know you was still working." He's like 80 years old. And so from there, my life has just been continued blessing after blessing. It hasn't been easy, don't misunderstand, but I kept my faith, and I'm still here.
And life is never going to be easy, and I think the sooner people start realizing that life is not always going to be easy, the better they can position themselves to cope with the things that come their way.
Yes, and I say that life has bumps in the road, right? You have a bump. Some of them will stop you for a minute, and some you can just go over or go around. And so that's what we're here to talk about with Tia today. Tia's story is one of survival, and there's so much to her story. I told Tia, I said, just kind of, talk to us about, why you're here today and giving this testimony, because it truly is a testimony. So share with our audience a little bit about your story. And if you all want to call in, the number is 833-202-8255.
Well, I was molested as a child. I was 9 years old. It was well, not weird, but as a child, you're told to, if you're left with someone, you're told to do what this person tells you to do, and so on. Like, this is the adult, so you're supposed to do what they say. And as 9 years old, I had no idea about sex, none of that. I didn't know anything about that. So I was molested at 9. It happened a few times before an older cousin intervened and realized what was going on. I never really shared that story with anyone because it's more so of people are so quick to judge when they have never been in your shoes, can't relate to it. It's always, but it's easy to say that when you're not involved in that situation. And that kind of set the tone for my life because I had the mind frame that sex was okay and this is what you're supposed to do. So I had to kind of figure life out on my own, so to speak. So when I got into my teenage years, I was labeled as a freak and you name it. But that wasn't
Hold on for 1 second, because I think you just said something that was so powerful that I don't want us to just miss. And so those of you who have experienced this or have children, what she said was so powerful. She was left with someone, and she was told to do what they said do at 9 years old. And she did that. And that shaped who she was as a young child, right? And fortunately, you had a cousin that kind of found out what was happening. And can you talk about that? How did your cousin find out? Was it a male or a female?
My cousin that found out was a female. And I ended up living with her for a little while in my life. And she noticed, I was staying with her grandmother, so she would visit often. And she said that she just noticed a change in my demeanor that wasn't something that she saw often. And so she asked me, and you're always told not to say anything. That's the number one thing for any victim of abuse, doesn't matter what it is. You're always told never to say anything. So initially, I didn't talk to her. But she kept at it. She was real adamant. And so I eventually spoke to her, and she removed me from there. And that's how I ended up staying with her. And staying with her is where I learned where these are things that women are supposed to do, what women are not supposed to do. And so it helped me realize what my worth was. I didn't even realize that women had worth, or, you know, are supposed to look at themselves as a certain way and hold your head high and think value of yourself. I had no idea of any of that.
So where were your parents?
Well, my father, I hadn't seen my father since I was like 5. He was abusive to my mom. So that's something that I grew up watching. And my mom, I kind of was a rebel to her. So at the time, I was staying with other family to try to give me some time to get myself together, so to speak. So my mom had no idea of any of the things that were going on, and she honestly didn't know until I became an adult. I didn't want to share those things with her.
So you were living with someone because your mom thought you were a rebel at 9 years old?
I was rebelling against my mom.
Okay.
So we weren't really getting along.
Okay.
So my cousin stepped in, the cousin that actually realized what was going on with me, and she stepped in and said, come stay with me for a while.
Okay.
But at that time, I didn't want to stay with her either. I was staying with her grandmother because that's where all the other children were. She didn't really have any children my age. So I stayed with her grandmom, and that's where the molestation happened. So when she found out, she removed me, and she helped me realize, you know, things that women are supposed to feel about themselves and value yourself, and she showed me how to be a woman, actually.
Awesome.
So going through my teenage years, when I went back to live with my mom, we worked on our relationship, but I still didn't really share that with her because I knew it would tear her apart, and I didn't want to do that to her because immediately I knew she would think that it was her fault and all of that, and it wasn't her fault. She, you know, she had no idea, and it had nothing to do with her. So, but in school, I was labeled a freak and all of that because I only hung around boys. But I only hung around boys because girls didn't like me. So it's like, what am I supposed to do here? And at 13, I met my oldest son's father. There was an 8-year gap between us. So he was.
Hold on, let's do the math.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were 13 and he was 21.
He was 21. Yes, ma'am.
Wow. And your oldest son,
He's 23 now.
the oldest son is 23, and you are
I'm
39.
39,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
So I met him. I think I told him I was a little older, but not that much older because I've always been a thick girl. So, but when he did find out how old I was, he still was there. I can say, even though he was a grown man and he had no business dealing with me, I can say he helped me to gain my reputation back, because when he came to my home and he saw all of the awards I had on the wall for honor roll and things like that, when he would hear the things that people would say about me, he was well known in the streets. He shut that down. So he kind of helped me regain my reputation, because that wasn't who I was. People assume things about you, and people just run with it. They never get the time to take to know you or any of that. They just run with it.
Okay, so let me interject right here, because, you know, it's very easy to be judgmental of people. And so the whole notion that you're talking about, you know, people who didn't know you making passing judgments on you, you know, not that any of us are immune to that or have not done that ourselves. But now is just a great time for us to really stop and check ourselves on that, and try to minimize the amount of judgment we pass on to others.
Right.
And also, I would say, as a behaviorist, you know, people that pass judgment on you can relate in some way, and you know, so they're trying to hide their own pain, and I don't want anyone else to know that perhaps they've been through something similar. But I think that passing judgment on people when you don't know people's stories, we just have to check ourselves and just kind of stop it. We got to be more compassionate. and be understanding. And, you know, when people's behaviors are out of sorts, you know, I always say,
It's a reason.
there's a reason,
Yes.
right? What is the reason? And getting to the reason is not always easy. But if we stop and we just say that, because people just don't act a certain way for no reason, there's always a reason. Just trying to get to that is sometimes challenging.
Very true. Because I myself now, it's so quickly, especially when I found out a woman is dealing with domestic violence, people are so, oh, girl, you stupid. And, you know, there's no way I would, no.
And you should leave.
Right. It's not that easy. You know, it's not that easy, because I dealt with that as well with my oldest son's father. And it started out with just a smack. And it was so shocking to me when it happened. I was, you know, I'm like, what in the world? You know, and so, of course, I saw that growing up. So, again, in my mind, that was never discussed with me, that you should not allow a man to put his hands on you. So, you know, I'm looking at it as though, okay, what am I supposed to do? You know, I didn't really know. So when it happened, of course, you know, the things that they do, he apologized and, you know, I'll never do it again, and so on and so forth. And it wasn't like it happened continuously. However, it should have never happened.
Right, exactly.
So it got, every time it happened, it got worse. There was one time actually with, you know, my best friend who's here. I was in high school, and he came to my mom's house, and
The 22-year-old? Okay.
I was in the bathroom. He came in the bathroom, kicked the door in the bathroom. You know, that happened there. And then on the process, out on the way out, he snatched my son from my best friend. So it just, you know, every time it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And so in my situation, because when I was 16, I left my mom. And I think I'm grown. And so I left. And because of his age, he took care of me. I had cars, I had clothes, money, you name it, I had it. So that situation of just leave, it's not that easy, because he was my provider. And I'm like, if I leave, what am I going to do? You know, I basically even told my mom, I don't need you, and so on. So I'm like, I have nowhere to go. So I dealt with it. It wasn't because I wanted to be. Who wants to get beat up and, you know, abused verbally, physically? Nobody wants that. But sometimes you have to think people are in situations that they really have no control over. So I endured it, and it actually made me a hustler. That might sound weird, but it made me a hustler because I started working at a young age, and I've never stopped. And so once I got to a point where I could take on a few jobs, I did that. And when I got up that strength and that courage and that love for myself, I told him, you know what? You can meet me here, and we're going to fight, and we're going to do whatever we need to do, but I'm done with this. And once he realized that I was not afraid of him anymore, I didn't have to worry about him. But it took for me to realize he was thriving off my fear. But you don't know that when you're going through it at the time. And I mean, I've had to deal with abuse from him while I'm holding my son. He didn't care. Like, a lot of times people say men who hit women are, you know, they classify them as punks, and I agree, but it's normally a case where that man wouldn't fight another man. No, he would fight anybody. And so he was the type that I really had to plan my escape. And that might sound like a TV movie, but I really had to plan my escape from him. Because even once we separated, he found someone else, I found someone else, he still made me have sex with him.
So hold on for a second. When you planned your escape, so far, and this is why we're here. So far, we have talked about child molestation, we've talked about teenage pregnancy, and we've talked about domestic violence. And just think about that. That's pretty heavy. I can't imagine that, and I just think it's very courageous of you to come on and give your testimony to help somebody else. Absolutely. So when you made your escape, how old were you then?
So we started dating. Well, I met him when I was 13.
And he was 22.
He was 21.
21.
I did not fully was released from him until I was 24.
Wow. Wow.
And even though, like I said, we had separated, living separate from each other, there was still that fear there of him. And so I was still made to have sex with him. So being as though I'm with someone else, we didn't have sex the regular way. It was sodomized. He sodomized me because he's like, I know no one has been there. So that's how we had sex. And
so hold on. Sodomy.
Yes.
Yes. So those of you, that have your children, you can look that up online, Google it. But most of us understand what that means when you use objects and things like that to penetrate a woman's body or a man's body. And so why that? Why did he decide on sodomy versus just he knew he had you, that you were fearful?
He said that, by this time I'm living with someone else. So he said, I know you're having sex with him, but this way I don't have to share.
Oh, okay.
Because I had never done that before. So, and when that happened, the things that I felt for myself, I said, it's no way I can do this. And no one knew about it. Like I would hide bruises, everything from my mom, everyone. I mean, it's times where we had just got into it and I had to go take my mom to the grocery store and I would cover my bruises up with my face. I always had long hair, so I would cover it up. No one knew. And I kept it a secret. And it's crazy because growing up, I went to every church. I'm in the Catholic church, Baptist church, Christian church, Episcopalian, you name it. I went to all of those churches. And so when I was going through these things, I would just talk and I would just ask God, please help me. But at that time, I didn't know what I was doing was prayer. Because when I went to church, I was young, so it's not like I was really paying attention. I'm just going to church because they made me go to church. But in actuality, I was listening because I knew about prayer. I just didn't realize that's what I was doing. And so I prayed every day. And once I started realizing the power in my prayer is when I mustered up that strength to go head on with him. And when he realized that I was not afraid of him anymore, that was it. And I swear his life has been, he did 5 years in jail. He didn't see his children graduate from school. I forgot to mention that part. When I met him, he had two children. When we separated, he had 7, including mine. And mine, it was not the youngest. So I dealt with the cheating, the beatings. He actually was the first person that raped me because he would cut my clothes off and I didn't really have a choice. That's rape. If you say no, I don't care who it could be a husband. If you say no, bottom line is no. And if they proceed, that's rape. I don't care what anybody else tells you or how they try to dress it up, it's rape. And you don't have to accept that. But, again, at the time, this was my what am I going to do? You know what I'm saying? So once I started working and I was paying the rent and all of those things, I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And, my son has been around during these altercations. So once it got to a point where before we separated, the violence wasn't a thing anymore. But I still had that fear of him because he still verbally abused me and he would use the times that he has hit me to kind of make me scared. He would say certain things, and so that's all that I needed to hear. And we couldn't play around. My son would scream frantically, and that tore me up inside. And one thing about it, you can do whatever you want to do to me, but when it comes to my children, I don't play any of those games. So when I realized that my son was afraid, I'm like, how can I call myself his mom if I'm not protecting him? He's scared to death. And that's when I decided that I had to take some steps to get out of that.
Let me
No, go ahead, Sharon.
one of the things you just said just kind of struck me, and I hear people say this all the time, parents and other people, you can do to me what you want, but I'm thinking, no, you can't. You know,
Absolutely.
no, you can't.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of people that may have been in similar type of situations and have children, I think I understand what you're saying.
Right.
But when what you're saying is that when you start messing with my child, you really have crossed the line.
Yeah. There's
And
no fear for me.
yes, exactly.
And the way I take it is, I may allow you to use and abuse me, but I will
Right.
not allow you to
Absolutely.
use my child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no fear when it comes to my children. And so when I realized that my son was afraid is when I started to plan my escape from him. And he started going to jail. He literally went to jail like every 6 months to a year. And I'm left to raise my son. And, you know, one of his other children's mom, she and I became close. And
Yes.
I told her, because we didn't get along because of him, of course, because he's going back and forth between the both of us.
Right.
But one of the last times that he went to jail was the longest stretch he's ever received prior to the 5 years. And I told her, I said, listen, you don't have to like me, I don't have to like you, but these children, we have to take care of these. But she has 4 kids, all boys. My son was a boy. They were used to growing up together, being around each other. And to this day, they're all they have. My oldest son and one of the other sons, they live together. They have their own apartment. Like, we've always raised them that way. So she and I raised our children together.
So how did you come to that? You know, that's pretty, you know, because you're pretty young going through a lot of this. How did you come to that level of maturity? Because that's maturity.
It really is.
Everyone says we have a weird relationship. Like, I call her my baby mother because we took care of our children together.
I think that's awesome.
And
Awesome.
I really, and I told her, I went to her and I just was like, listen, the children are more important than us. And they were. Their father's gone. They had, on both ends, no other positive male role models in their lives. So, you know, and I'm not one of those moms who think that, you know, the boys don't need a man in their life, because they definitely do.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of things that we cannot teach them.
Yes.
And there's a lot of things that they're not going to talk to you about because you are their mother. However, in the time being, we can teach them how to be responsible adults. And so I told her, we just gotta get it together. And so we will put our money together. If she needed and I had, vice versa, that's what we did. And all of the children were very close in age, so clothes was handed down, and you know, we did what we had to do.
That's smart.
We did what we had to do, and to this day, we're still a family. Holidays, we're together. Like, that's how we.
Because you all didn't like each other because you didn't like each other.
Right.
Exactly.
Because of him.
Exactly.
You know, he's going back and forth.
Yes.
And all of this foolishness. So we didn't really have an issue with each other. So
Right.
it took for us to realize that, and it's been 20-some years, and we're still together. We're still a family.
So where is he now?
Now he's out now. He's been out for about a few years. He and I actually, we're in a good place. That might sound weird, but we're in a good place. He actually apologized to me. He's apologized to me before, but it's been one of those apologies, you made me do this type of thing. No, I didn't make you do anything. So, but finally, I got a sincere apology from him. I'm sorry. He thanked me for always. He was never worried about our son, the rest of his sons, for taking on the role in his other children's lives, and I saw the sincerity in it, and so I forgave him. I forgave him because, regardless of the things that he did to me, he taught me a lot. He really did. He taught me a lot. I thank him, and I know that might sound weird, but I thank him for the things that I went through, because it made me the woman that I am today.
And you don't think you would have been that woman without going through those things?
I feel like I would have been. However, I got my strength from having to endure those things with him, and it made me the person that I am, because I clearly, and she could tell you, whenever I meet someone, especially a woman, and I can see things that other people can't, and it's because I know what I went through. Mm-hmm. And people are always so, she crazy and all that. No, it's not that. People have to take the time to try to get to know someone, ask questions, things like that, because I used to be that person. And I'm not saying that I don't, talk about people or say things. I'm not saying any of that. But I have compassion for people that I didn't have before.
Isn't it funny how people say she's crazy,
right,
and not he's crazy?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Anytime a man is mentally, physically, verbally, sexually abusing another person, may it be a man or female, and the same is true for women. It's not the victim that's crazy; it's the abusers who are crazy. Right. And so we need to get our language straight on that.
And that's what I was saying, that the female always gets that label, and that's part of the reason that people don't share their stories, because nobody wants to be judged. I mean, I've had people in my face blatantly say, I can't believe you went through that, and what's wrong with you, and so on and so forth. And I'm looking at them like, who would want to go through that? Just voluntarily, oh, hey, I want you to beat me up on a consistent. No, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. But people have to think, especially for me, I saw it growing up. And I would see the after effect. I never physically saw my father hit my mom, but I would see the after effects of it. Mm-hmm. I would come home from playing outside, and she has a busted lip, or she's crying. My father even he wouldn't let us leave the house one day when my mom decided that she couldn't take it no more. He held us hostage. He had a gun. Mm-hmm. We couldn't leave. So those things, if you don't talk those things out with someone, or I don't know if treat is the proper word, but if things just continue have a continuing process and a cycle in your life, it's going to continue into your life. And if you don't do anything about it, that's how that becomes your life.
Wow.
So let me ask you this then. You did just bring up a good point. So did you ever go to counseling?
I did.
That's good.
And I thank God that I went to counseling, because I used to be a ticking time bomb. I would not communicate with anyone. I had the worst attitude you could ever imagine, but people didn't know my struggle. They didn't know why I had this attitude. And I will admit, to this day, I'm still not that person that when you first meet, hey, that's just not who I am.
You're still guarded, a little guarded.
I am. But I'm kind of glad that I have that, because I'm a good judge of character also. And I've also been that friend that my circle comes to in reference to other people, and I'm always right. And I'm not trying to say that,
yes.
But I really am a good judge of character, but it's because people have abused me so much, and I'm not just speaking in terms of the domestic violence and, just people in general. When you have a good heart, people abuse that. And you have to be careful with that. But at the same time, you want to say, why should I alter who I am because someone doesn't know how to appreciate you?
Yes.
You just have to learn how to
manage it and deal with it. So let me just say this. I want to really talk about something that we need to talk about just as a people and in our society when it comes to our young girls. And the perception and the labels that's put on young girls. And so what we're going to do is take a quick break. And when we come back from the break, we're going to continue this conversation. And then we want to know your personality. You seem so positive. What is it? What is it about you that's helping you to survive and to thrive? Okay. So we'll be back after a short break.
Sisters and Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle, and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twist and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep. What company do you keep?
Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of South Chicago. So get ready to keep company with us as we talk about it.
Okay, welcome back.
Wow.
I was just saying during the commercial break to Tia, I'm usually the comedian up here, and so many things was going through my head, and it's such a serious topic that I didn't want to make light of it. But I'm just impressed with myself that I didn't let those things come out my mouth. And I tried to control my facial expression. I can see it on the screen here in the studio, and so I think I did pretty good with that as well.
And that's why, as I'm listening, I just struggle with people that want to say, what's wrong with her, why is she acting that way? Well, you're asking some good questions, but it's the tone around it that just really, really unnerves me, because so many of our little girls and little boys, they have been traumatized. Then you wonder when they grow up why they have such attitudes or why they engage in such reckless behavior. It's because somebody violated them in the prime of their little young lives. In their minds, they're not adults. They don't have the capacity. They have no control. Somebody's gained power over them and taken advantage of them. So I'm telling you, if that's you out there, or if you know someone, somebody have got to advocate. Because see, this is what 1 John talks about. We do have an advocate. Yes. We have an advocate in our faith in God, and we got to have an advocate in people to believe when children are saying to them, because children tell you what's going on with them. If they don't tell you in words, they tell you in actions. Mm-hmm. So just God bless you for even being here to share that story, because we have talked about child molestation. We talked about rape, and you mentioned one time, so I'm assuming there's multiple times. You talked about domestic violence, and then being a teenage mom all at the same time. One of the things Sherelle asked you about is counseling. How did you get to counseling? Well, how did that happen, and what was the outcome of that for you?
I went through a phase also where I would take things that didn't belong to me, and you name it. I was acting out
for attention.
Yes, I was acting out, and an aunt that my mom was really close with, she was always around, because my father was never a part of my life. Once we left, he wanted nothing to do with me if he couldn't have any dealings with my mom. Mm-hmm. So he was never a part of my life. And she would stick around for that reason. And so she actually got me into counseling. And I started to talk about the molestation in counseling, but I never discussed it with my aunt because she didn't sit in on the counseling. Right. Mm-hmm. But I started to notice that when I spoke about those things, it made me feel better. Mm-hmm. Our race puts a bad light on therapy, and it's really one of the best things you can do is to have someone else to talk to, an unbiased person. Right, exactly. To speak to. But it's even better when you have someone that you know loves you and support that you can talk to. And that was one of the things that was missing in my life, is I felt that I had no one that I could talk to. Mm-hmm. And as being a girl, that's really hard because, you have the rapes and any type of abuse that women endure. And so that's one of the biggest issues why they hold everything inside, because they don't want to be judged. And you feel like no one can relate to you, which is why I'm here, because I want people to know that I get it. I understand, and anything I could do to help, is what I want to do, because I would never want anyone to endure the things that I went through if I can help you through that.
So let me say this to you. In my book, I have most of you that listen to me and know me, I have a book called Mind Your Mind, #Think About It. And one of the chapters that I often talk about, because I find myself in this conversation weekly, actually, it's about generational thinking challenges. And, when you were talking, I was thinking about that chapter in that book. And was your mom a teenage mom?
She was.
She was. Okay. And so that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you talked about cycles. Yeah,
Right.
there are cycles. And if we don't do something really radical or bold to break away from it or make a decision, right, to say, not me, this is not going to happen to me.
Yes.
And so you as a mom, as a teenage mom, what was that experience like, and how did you decide to raise your boy? What kind of mom were you?
So I was pregnant in the 11th grade. Everyone was, oh, she's never going to graduate, and she only had one more year, and you name it, I heard it. But for me, quitting was never an option. It was never an option, because I was at that phase of my life where I felt like I had to prove people wrong, because I was reestablishing my relationship with my mom, and it really hurt her to find out that I was pregnant. But I refused to get rid of my child. That was one of the things that she said, you're not going to have this baby. And I'm like, I am going to have this baby.
Yes.
So, but
Let me ask you something about that point. Did you want to have the baby because you wanted to have somebody, or you thought you needed somebody who would love you unconditionally, or were you trying to have the baby because you thought that this would hold on to him, or?
I never thought about him. Honestly, I wanted to have my child because I wanted that love, that I didn't have. Well, I'm not going to say didn't have, but it wasn't right there for me growing up. So when I found out I was pregnant, I was ecstatic, even though I'm this young child, but for me, I was happy about it. And I'm very intelligent, and I was in public service academy, which was completely separate from the general population in school. So I was already in gifted classes. I refused to allow that to fall by the wayside. I went to school every single day when I was pregnant. I caught the bus. I caught 2 buses to school. And I graduated on time. And my son and I, we are very close. Even though he's a boy, we talk about everything.
Does he know your story?
He knows about the domestic violence, but he doesn't really know about the child molestation, things like that. He doesn't want to hear those type of things. But even though he was a boy, I made it so that he would never feel uncomfortable to come to talk to me about anything. I mean, I had to show him how to use the bathroom, So we're really close, and I treasure that, because that's one of the most important things when you're a parent, to kind of, that's kind of a good way to avoid things happening to your children, is if your child does not have that fear of communicating with you about anything. And I made sure that my son was never fearful to come to speak to me about anything. Like we send weird memes back and forth to each other that, most parents probably wouldn't do, but that's how good our relationship is. And I treasure that, because he knows that I have his back for any and everything, and it's the same for me. So part of the things that I promised myself was that I would be the best mom that I could to him. And I know there were times where, because I was young, where I wanted to go out and party and be with my friends. And, it kind of, that was a problem for me for a little bit in my life. But my mom had a friend that she worked with, and she's been a part of my life since I was I want to say 12, might be a little younger. And she is still a part of my life. She is both of my children's godmother, and she is the best support system that I have ever had. And once the relationship with my mom and I got better and we started to communicate, she's been the best support system that I could ever have. Support is, you have nothing if you
Don't have support.
no support. And she, I call her Nana. Well, my youngest son calls her Nana. She was there for me during that time frame where I wanted to go out and get that out of my system, I guess, so to speak, with my oldest son. And she would keep him, and she never made me feel bad, you know, for wanting to go out and things like that. And so once I got that out of my system, it was just he and I, because once I left his dad, I left home when I was 16, and I never went back, thank God. But when I was 34 years old, I had to return home with my mom, and that was the most, I can't even describe how
So hold
I felt.
on right there. I just really want to ask you because, you know, as an educator, I've seen some things with young kids and parents. But at 9 years old, how does a relationship with your mother become so fractured? You understand what I'm saying? That
Because she was going through her phase of, I want to party, and, you know. So
How old was she when you were 9?
My mom. So I have a brother. We're 10 years apart. So
Okay.
my mom had me kind of late. She was 28 when she had me.
Oh, okay.
So she was pretty much used to being free.
Right.
And, which is kind of my situation now.
Yeah.
Right. Because now I have a 3-year-old.
That's exactly right.
You know, life repeats itself.
Yes.
So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and they were older.
Yes.
So, you know, once they passed, I was, you know, of course with my mom more, but she worked a lot, and she's always been, and that's where I get my hustle from, because she always worked. She did whatever she had to do. My brother and I can honestly say I didn't experience poverty and struggle until I did spend that time frame with my cousins. But my mom, I mean, Christmas floor was completely covered. She did that for us. But it didn't, those type of things couldn't make up for the time
Right.
that was, you know, lost.
Say
So
that one more time, because
definitely.
parents, I need you to hear this part.
no monetary value, gifts, clothes, none of that. None of that can substitute for the time that you need with your children. Nothing. And that's part of what I'm going through now with my youngest son. He's 3 years old. He has no idea who his father is. And
Talk to us about that.
his father, is nothing wrong with him. He's perfectly well, alive, out here doing his thing. And he's not a part of his child's life because he can't be a part of my life. So for me,
Okay, hold on. Because here's another cycle. Your father didn't want to have
the same
anything
thing
to
to
do with
me,
you
absolutely.
because he couldn't be with your
My
mother.
mother.
And now here you have a son whose father don't want to be a part of his life because he can't
Be in
with
my
you.
life.
Okay.
But for me, I'll deal with that because I'm not going to allow you to pity back and forth. You know what I'm saying? Let me make this clear. I've never told him that he cannot be a part of his child's life. He knows where we live right now. He has my phone number. I have his phone number. However, I'm not going to continue to call a grown man and say, why don't you come see your son? Can you do this? Can you do that? I'm just not that type of person. So I'm here. I take care of my son. I work 6 days a week. Like I said, I have the support of my family and friends, and he's fine. He has his older brothers, so he has that male that positive male role model around him. He sees his older brothers consistently. It's not just a, here and there thing. He sees them consistently. They play with him. He's the old boy. So I would love for his dad to be a part of his life, but I don't feel like I should have to make him be in his life. So he knows where
I don't know that you can.
Right. He knows where his child is. The door has always been open. People, I get condemned for that as well, because they're like, why do you keep, reaching out to him? Because I never wanted to be said that I was the reason that he was not a part of his son's life, because that's not what I want. I never had my father there, so I want my children to have that. And even though my oldest son's father was in and out of jail, when he was present, he was present. I'm never going to take that away from him. And he has a good relationship with his boys now. So, and even with that, my youngest son, he's a part of his life as well.
Can I just ask you a real question? No judgment. But I already know I'm trying to look to see who got questions on Facebook. But why? Why have the child, the 3-year-old, with this guy? What was it about him? Why get pregnant? Why have a child with this man?
So, at one point in time, I was engaged, and I was trying to have children, and
to this guy?
No.
Okay, someone else. Okay.
And this was after your oldest child.
And nothing happened. So for 19 years, I never had any pregnancies, abortions, miscarriages, nothing. And I honestly thought I couldn't have any more children.
Okay.
And he and I got together. We actually went to junior high school together, and we were reunited on Facebook. And
social media,
we were reunited on Facebook, and so we started hanging out with each other, and getting to know the new things about each other from when we were younger.
Right.
And I thought he was this great guy. And he has other children, and I saw him interact with his other children. I've even taken him to drop things off to the other children. I've been around when he's spoken on the phone with them and had them for the weekends and all of that. So when I got pregnant, he wasn't even there during my pregnancy. And I had a high-risk pregnancy because I was 35 years old. I have high blood pressure. So I endured a lot of things during my pregnancy. I was in full-blown labor at 8 months old. 8 months. I'm sorry, 8 months. And they had to stop the labor, and literally every weekend after that, I was in the emergency room for contractions.
Did the two of you talk about, that this is going to be a relationship that we're going to be in? We were in
a relationship. He even talked about me having his child, and then once it actually was presented to him, I'm not really sure why. So they went through. There was a time period where I lost my job. I had to move back home with my mom. And every time I thought I was leaving, God said no. And I lost my uncle, who was like basically my father to me. So I couldn't leave then. And then the last time I got pregnant, and I thank God that I was there with my mom, because she helped me, because I had no other help from him, and I was having health issues. So, everything happens for a reason. I don't know if anybody else believes that, but everything happens for a reason. And so I had to take him to court for child support because he disappeared for like 11 months. I didn't hear anything from him, didn't know what was going on with him. I had no income. I had to go apply for food stamps, Medicaid. I needed everything. And so because of that, I had to take him up for child support. And I had all his information, so I voluntarily gave it to him. I'm not going to lie to you. I voluntarily gave it all to him.
I was going to say, but you didn't go for child support because you didn't have any money. No, you went because that was his responsibility.
Right.
Exactly.
And so I gave him his information. And so I saw him again at court. And he came to me and he apologized to me and, all of the things that you would want to hear. And that didn't last long. And so this is where we are now, and he's still not a part of his child's life.
So your best friend is sitting here in the studio. I wish we could have had her up here with us. But what kind of support? What does she mean to you? And how long have you all been knowing each other?
We've known each other since we're 15 years old. Yeah, 10th
Wow.
grade. And the story that I told you all about, we had a separation because of that, because she had never experienced domestic violence, and I kind of held resentment towards her because I was like, you know, how could you let him take my son? And, you know, or I lashed out at her. And then we had plans that evening for us to spend the night together and all of that, but she ended up going home. And I held that against her for a very, very long time. So we had a separation in our relationship, and Facebook reunited us as well. But it's, you know, we picked up where we left off. Like, she's supported me through so much, and I try to do the same for her. My children love her, vice versa.
And so we, you know, this whole conversation, again, is just so powerful to me. And I just say bless you for, you know, perseverance. And we, you know, no one is perfect in life, right? And Sherelle started out by saying everybody has a story, because everybody does have a story. And so I just thank you for, you know, sharing your testimony, because you don't know who's listening. And they're looking at you, and they're going through something similar, and they can say, now, if she could make it.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if this is correct, but you don't sound bitter.
No.
You don't sound sad. You know, you have your life, you're working, you're taking care of yourself, you're living a productive life with your youngest baby. Your 22-year-old, I'm assuming, has managed to do pretty well in life.
Yes,
and tell us, where is he?
He has his own place.
Outstanding.
Hallelujah.
Does he have children?
No, he does not.
There it is.
And
Stop the cycle.
yes, I was just going to say that. And he's 23 years old, does not have any children. He has a girlfriend. They've been together for a few years, and they're both focused on careers and working, so they know that they're not ready, and I thank God for that. But yes, he has his own place. He's a manager at Roti Restaurant. I'm very blessed
Proud of
with
him.
my son,
Yes.
especially with what's going on in these streets.
Yes.
My son, he works, goes home. That's it.
Yeah, that's a
it.
smart young man to do that. So that says something about, you know, who you are as a mom and as a woman, and doing the best that you can. And of course, you know, the time goes by so quickly. And so thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again, Tia, for being here. Thank you for coming to, you know, my conference, and you know, getting the courage to want to tell your story, because I'm sure you have helped somebody.
About that conference changed my life, because for years I've always wanted to share my testimony, but I never did anything about it, and so I kind of just let it go. But when I went to that conference, and she was my best friend's boss, I was like, there's no way I could just continue not to say anything. So I thank you for that conference.
No, thank you for being obedient to come. So we're going to sign off shortly. I hope you all have enjoyed the conversation. And neither one of us will be here next week, so we're going to have a replay. And when we come back on the 8th, we'll
be here with two special co-hosts.
Yes, because I won't be here the next 2 weekends, but I'll be back on the 15th with a co-host myself.
It's the summer.
Yes. So have a good afternoon, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes.